So hello and welcome. Today I'm speaking with scientist, crystal healer and yoga teacher Tim Jones on the healing power of orgonite. And Tim studied applied and molecular biology and qualified to teach chemistry, biology and physics, and spent 27 years in the field of molecular genetics, a field he left in 2020. And Tim had a spiritual awakening at the turn of the millennium and resulted in him exploring a wide range of spiritual disciplines and practices. He's had a keen interest in esoteric sciences for many years. He's a certificated crystal practitioner with an open university certificate in mineralogy. I have to get my mouth around that. And certificates in sacred geometry and magnetic healing. He's been teaching yoga for 12 years and he's got an amazing website selling orgonite pieces. We're talking about that in a minute. His website is quantumvortex.net, and that link and also his Instagram link will go out with this podcast. So hi, Tim.
Hi, Steve, and many thanks for inviting me.
Oh, pleasure. I mean, I love your stuff. You know, I'm just going to show everyone a couple of pieces. They're so heavy. Goodness. I got this one and bought that one. That was the first piece I bought. And then I got this one, and I do love them. Look, there's all of that Egyptian. This is the Egyptian one. I like this one, and incredible. And because I've got a number of orgonite pieces, but they're kind of like that, you know. And then I saw your ones, and I'm like, your ones look so much more intricate and better. But before we get into that, can I ask you, how did you make the shift? Why did you shift away from science and all of that side into orgonite and what you're into now?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, my field was molecular biology, molecular genetics. So I spent 27 years in the field of DNA and RNA analysis. So I watched this technology evolve from when I went into that field in 1995, from a very basic technology, still using radiation to label DNA, to this ultra powerful supercomputer based, we can analyze 24 genomes in 24 hours, which was very powerful evolution. And I really felt that this technology was being used for the greater good to help humankind. But, and I'll be very careful about what I say here for both legal and energetic reasons. But let's just say that after the events of 2020, it became very clear to me that what was going on in the field with DNA and RNA certainly did not resonate with me. And I could no longer work in that field. So I came to a mutual agreement with my employers to leave that field. And I, as you mentioned, I'd also had a foot in each of two worlds since the turn of the millennium. I got my first crystal at a mind, body, spirit show in Brighton, actually.
Oh, right.
I remember the date, 5th of April, 2003. I had a psychic reading with a medium. And this is back in the days of cassette tapes, and I'd play the tape over and over again, and she'd say, yep, it's the 5th of April, 2003. This is Tim Jones's reading. And so that date is burned in my mind. And also there was a crystal on one of the stalls there that as I was walking along, I could almost feel like my feet like sticking, like almost in treacle as I was walking. And I was like, this is interesting. And so I felt like it reached a point where my feet stuck to the floor. And I could feel this subtle energy just turning my body. And then when this energy stopped moving me, I was staring at this crystal, which I'd never had any interest in before. I'd been very left brain dominant, scientifically minded, but things had started shifting where my perception was shifting in ways I hadn't expected or anticipated. So I was staring at this crystal, and I said to the guy on the stall, what is that? And it was a piece of desert rose. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I have to have it. And that is when my crystal journey started. And so I was walking with one foot in each of these worlds, as I say, for about the last 20 years. And around about the same time, 2020, as I had this next level awakening with what was going on in the world at the time, and also just became very aware of the dangers of 5G and EMFs. I mean, I've been wearing EMF protection, various different forms, for many years, but I felt like I just need to up the level of protection in my house. And like yourself, I mean, that one that you just showed is probably very lightweight compared to, I've got a few here as well, and they are very heavy, the orgonites that I make. A true orgonite needs to have a very high metal content. And as you can see in yours, in all my plates, all my pyramids, these metals, I'll expand on this a bit later, they have to be layered in quite a specific way as well for it to truly generate orgone energy. And so I had bought a few sort of cheaper ones, the cheapest ones I found on Amazon, I think. I was like, I don't want to spend too much money. But then being a scientist, as I started to research it a bit more heavily, I realized that the ones I'd spent this money on were actually not even orgonites at all. And for a true orgonite, it needs to be these metals layered in a specific way. So then I found somebody who did make legitimate orgonites with properly layered metals, and bought a few from her. And then I started coming up, basically downloading images of pyramids in my mind. And I started drawing some diagrams for her and saying, could you make one like this? And could you make one like that? And she basically came back to me and she was like, Tim, your ideas are fantastic, but they're far too complicated for me. I don't think I could possibly make the things you're describing. But she fully encouraged me to start making them myself. And she told me where she imports this high quality resin from Germany. So she put me onto her resin supplier so I could get started with that. And that's really how I started making them. And continually researching, it's a never-ending journey of learning and expanding my knowledge to continue to improve them.
What are the uses of orgonite? I mean, how do you use them? If you're going to protect yourself from EMF or good night's sleep, or maybe uplift your food, what are the various ways you use it or can be used?
So, well, it's probably worth going back a step to explaining what orgone energy actually is in order to fully answer that question. And so this what's termed orgone energy, which is what's generated by orgonites, this was actually rediscovered by a scientist called Wilhelm Reich back in the 1930s. So he was actually a student of Sigmund Freud, funnily enough. And so following on from a lot of Freud's work, but he was also doing research into life force energy. And he was wanting to actually measure the life force energy of microorganisms. And so what was happening there is he was trying to find a way to accurately measure the life force energy of these microorganisms. He was finding that he was getting a lot of interference from background radiation. Of course, back in the 1930s, they didn't have the same kind of technologies that we have these days. So he started experimenting with building a box that would basically shield these organisms from the background radiation so that he could measure the life force energy more accurately. And after various experiments with different types of boxes, he eventually came up with this box that was alternating layers of very specifically a ferromagnetic metal. So we're talking magnetic steel, and then wool, which is an organic material. And when he layered multiple layers of this steel, wool, all in a big box, he found that it was shielding the background radiation. But then as a completely accidental scientific discovery, he found that this life force energy was actually accumulating to a very high degree within the box. And so this then became his invention, the orgone accumulator, which was a big box made in this very specific way that would accumulate this orgone energy. And so orgone energy was a term that he came up with. But we recognize this. We know this is a life force energy that the ancients knew about millennia ago. So the ancient Chinese referred to it as qi. The ancient Indians referred to it as prana. So in all of these kind of Eastern philosophies where they talk about life force energy, qi, prana, ki, referred to with many other terms in many other cultures, this is essentially the same energy as orgone energy. So it occurs naturally in the quantum field as background energy. And this is the energy that infuses our bodies with life. So we're breathing in prana or chi or orgone every time we breathe. But certain environments will be much higher in that life force energy than others. So if you're out by, say, a waterfall or by the beach, or in a forest or on a mountain, you're going to get much higher levels of this chi or prana or orgone than you will do if you're, say, in the center of London or New York, where there's going to be a lot of pollution, there's going to be a lot of electromagnetic radiation, and essentially a lot of chaos. So what he found with how the orgone energy is being accumulated is, so if we're going back to scientific principles, we've got Newton's first law of thermodynamics, which says energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's just transformed from one form of energy to another. So what orgonite does, and what I should say with Wilhelm Reich, he generated this orgone accumulator. He actually had extremely good results with this box that he called the orgone accumulator. It's like maybe the size of a telephone box. Patients could come and sit in it and just sit for a few hours and basically meditate and just be healed by being within this healing orgone field. Had extremely good success with chronic illnesses such as cancer, diabetes, various different infectious diseases, and various other chronic health conditions. And of course, the medical industrial complex did not like the fact that there was this amazing scientist who was healing people for free, just getting them to sit in a box. So he was actually thrown in jail. All his research was burned and dismissed as pseudoscience. I do believe, don't quote me on this, but I do believe the burning of his research was considered the last official book burning in recorded history. But then so this is all back in the 1930s, 40s. Back in the early noughties now, there was another scientist called Carl Wells, a German scientist, who was able to access some of the last remaining research of Wilhelm Reich on the orgone accumulator. And he was the one who coined the term orgonite. And so what he did is he then miniaturized, rather than having this big box, he miniaturized them into these smaller devices like this, where you're still having the alternating layers of ferromagnetic metals. You can layer them with non-magnetic metals as well. So you're upping the metal content, but it's the ferromagnetic metals that are the most important. And then the organic material, rather than being wool, is the actual epoxy resin that the orgone is cast into. And so then he found that with these miniaturized devices, you could also accumulate orgone energy. And so the way it works is we have a lot of different frequency radiations, which are all different types of waves, electromagnetic waves in our environment. Some of them will come from electronic devices, from cell phone towers, from radio stations, from all the electrical pylons that are putting electricity all over the country as part of the national grid. You also do get, as we know, the Earth is covered in ley lines. So you get positive spots where there are healing energies, where they have sacred sites like the pyramids and Stonehenge and ancient sites and so forth. But there are also negative hotspots. There are also some negative grids, like, for example, the Hartman and Curry grid. So where there are these negative hotspots, you can actually also get negative energy coming up from the Earth. And then what an orgone or orgonite device does is, when it absorbs these chaotic frequencies that we would say are high entropy. So entropy is just chaos. So you've got these very chaotic, high energy frequencies that are flying around in your environment. When they get absorbed by an orgonite and they pass through the various layers of metal, that transmutes them from a chaotic and what can be quite a jarring frequency that's actually physiologically damaging to our bodies, and it transmutes them to a harmonic and healing frequency, which is then very healing for our body. And so if you, for example, put these around in a space, I mean, I have one on top of my Wi-Fi box, and back when I had my Sky TV, I had one on every different Sky box around the house and so on. and just basically grid the house with them. And this then creates a very healing field within the house. What it said is that then your house becomes infused with orgone energy rather than with these chaotic frequencies. And this healing field then just allows the natural healing processes of the body to take place, rather than having to fight against all of these chaotic, jarring frequencies. So many things like inflammation can calm down. Many conditions such as, tinnitus, headaches, migraines can be reduced quite naturally. So there are many sort of physical benefits to our bodies, but then also because of the lack of all of these chaotic frequencies, if we're into things like meditation, then it's much easier for us to enter those meditative states.
Wonderful. Now, it looks like there's all these different, in this one, it's probably easy to see, there's all these different shapes, isn't there? There's these different shapes, metallic shapes. I think you call it a triskelion, an SBB coil, and tensor rings. There's also crystals in there in various grids, it looks like, in that one. So can you say about all the makeup of all these kind of shapes and grids you've put in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, one of the things that Carl Wells and the people that he was working with discovered is that, because as I say, the generation of the orgone energy comes from the metal layering. So that's all that's really required, metal layers within the resin to generate the orgone energy from chaotic frequencies. But one of the things that he found is if you were to include crystals such as quartz, for example, piezoelectric. So what this means is when you compress the crystal, I've got a quartz crystal here actually, so it's probably easiest to just demonstrate holding this. So when this crystal is under compression, it polarizes. So you'll get a positive charge towards the apex of the crystal and a negative charge towards the base. And so what this does when you put the crystals within the resin, this actually polarizes the energy. Orgone energy can be both negative and positive. So we would term the bad jarring frequencies as negative orgone energy, or deadly orgone energy, it was often called. And then positive orgone energy is the healing energy. So when we include crystals, this piezoelectric effect enables the energy, the orgone energy that's accumulated, to definitely be transmuted into a positive orgone energy rather than a negative orgone energy. So crystals are actually a very powerful component to an orgone. But then what I also do, as you've seen, and I've got another plate here, this is one that I just posted on Instagram yesterday. It's one I custom made for a lady. I need to ship it off to America tomorrow. But it's a good example of how I use sacred geometry. So as you mentioned, I also studied sacred geometry. I'm quite passionate about it because it's actually an ancient science. It's far more science than it is art. And sacred geometry actually explains the foundation of our physical universe. So when you arrange crystals into what is known as a crystal grid, which is basically a geometric pattern of crystals, the crystals basically act very much like a stone circle, like you would see in Stonehenge or Avebury. So all of the outer crystals, basically, they will bounce energy, they'll radiate energy towards the center. And this energy is bounced off each other, and it's just amplified and amplified further. So whenever you arrange the crystals into a sacred geometric shape, you're always going to amplify the energy even further. And then I use these different lengths of wire, so to make 3 different wire structures. So as you mentioned, there's the triskelion that I use, the SBB coil, and the Tensor Ring. So the Tensor Ring, this is all on my website as well, and I might refer to that very briefly, actually. If I can quickly screen share, it might be easier to just show you on here on my website. Let me know if it's coming up okay, because I'm don't do this very often. So yeah,
there it is. Yeah,
Yeah, okay. So this page shows you the various components, just so you can see more easily. So the Triskelion is composed of 3 different coils, of one piece of wire, but coiled into 3 different coils. So this generates 3 vortices of energy. It is directional, so you can see here the way this is actually easier to see on the SBB coil, actually. The way this wire is orientated is so that the 2 wires are both facing clockwise as they coil round. They're both going around here and here in a clockwise direction. So what an SBB coil will do is it will draw energy in through the anti-clockwise face. So that's the face that's facing away from us in this picture, and then project it out of the clockwise face. So when I put these in an orgonite, I can use them very specifically to direct energy. So the SBB coil is like a single coil for this directional projection of energy. The Triskelion is a triple coil, so this will generate 3 vortices. So here is double coiled in the center, so you can see here both wires of the double coil are still facing clockwise, and then when they curl around in the opposite direction, they become anti-clockwise. But it's the double coiled section that's the important one here for the orientation of the Triskelion. So I will always, when I put these into my devices, I'm always orienting them in the direction I want energy to flow. And then lastly, the other structure that I often use is the tensor ring. So this is 2 wires that are coiled together and then joined together in the center to create a ring. And this generates what's called a tensor field. This was, as you can see up here, it was an invention of Slim Sperling. This is all on my website, so anyone can refer to this and read through it in more detail. But this generates an energetic field that is neither magnetic or electric, but it's like drawing on quantum energy, and again is very healing. And so what I will do is I will work with these 3 structures, but I'm also using very specific lengths of wire in order to use them. So I use 3 specific lengths. These are known as the sacred qubit. So they all have very specific lengths of wires, and they all have a specific frequency. So the sacred qubit is, that should say 144 megahertz. There's a typo there. This works basically mostly on the physical level. You've got the lost qubit, which is another length, 177 megahertz. This essentially works on the energetic level. Anyone can come back to this and read through it in more detail. And then you've got the empowerment qubit, a different length again. This works on mostly the energetic level. Oh, sorry, this works mostly on the spiritual level. So you've got the sacred is physical, lost qubit essentially energetic, empowerment qubit essentially spiritual level. And they each become more and more powerful as you increase in the length of the wire. And then what I do, if I just come back onto the screen, so I will then combine them in very specific ways. I don't actually have a good example to show you right now of one with a Triskelion on the face. But one thing I didn't mention, so the sacred qubit has a horizontal energy field. Sorry, the sacred qubit has a vertical energy field, so up and down. The lost qubit has a horizontal energy field, so it goes out side to side. And then the empowerment qubit has an energetic field that moves in all directions. So I will combine these very intelligently so that, for example, on the bottom of this pyramid, I've used a lost qubit for the tensor ring. So this is not only generating a tensor field, but because it has a horizontal energetic field, when this is obviously placed the right way up, it's directing energy inwards towards the center. Then I've used specifically a sacred qubit for the Triskelion, which has a vertical energy field. So all that energy is projected inwards towards the Triskelion and then projected upwards through the pyramid. And then on certain pyramids, then you may see if ever there's like a Triskelion or an SBB coil, I think on the 8-sided one that you've got an SBB coil on each side. So, which is have you got the other one, the other pyramid you bought? Okay.
That one's upstairs with my partner. She's commandeered it. So.
Okay. Well, I've got another one upstairs as well, but I won't run off and get it now. But often you'll see I will also put a Triskelion or an SBB coil on the face of a pyramid. So again, that has the horizontal energetic field, works mostly on an energetic level, and that will then be projecting energy out of each face of the pyramid. So whilst each of these things, I try and make them so that they look aesthetically beautiful, they each are there for a very energetic purpose, and they're each placed in an intelligent way to absolutely maximize the flow of energy through the pyramid or the plate. So again, if we go back to this plate, I've used a lost qubit tensor ring, which has a horizontal energy field to project energy into the center. You can't see it here really on the video, but underneath this blue agate slice, there is a sacred qubit SBB coil oriented to project energy up through the device. And then we've got empowerment qubit Triskelions around the edge. So I'm using all 3 qubit lengths to get all 3 healing frequencies, and then arranging them in these geometric patterns so that they're then interacting and amplifying the energy of each other in the device. So it's always function over beauty, always looking to maximize the energetic output of every device with how I arrange the Triskelions, SBB coils and tensor rings. But then I'm also, secondary to that, trying to make it look as beautiful as possible. The other thing, in addition to the wires, is I sometimes use, I don't know if we can see, if I get it close to the camera, you might see on here, there's what's called a Radionics Disc inside of here. This one's actually a tesseract. It's 24 karat gold plated, and it's 12-pointed geometric symbol. It acts again very much like a stone circle, so that each, you can see then there's also on this particular pyramid, there are 12 pieces of Preseli bluestone, which is the stone of the inner bluestone circle of Stonehenge. So I've basically, in this particular pyramid, I've got like a miniature Stonehenge underneath a pyrite pyramid. So we're combining the power of Stonehenge with the power of Egypt within a device. And so I use various Radionics discs. If I just quickly go back to the screen share again. Let's share this. So that's on the next page. I do need to edit my website to make this a little bit easier to navigate from the internal links. But yeah, there are several different Radionics discs that I use. Again, everyone can come to my website and see these in a bit more detail. It's all in the description. But for example, this is a 24 karat gold vortex antenna. So that will generate a vortex field. We've also got a torus field antenna. So 2 different types of torus field antenna, both 24 karat gold plated. So a vortex field is a much tighter energetic field. A torus field is more like a donut shape, slightly softer energy cast over a broader area. All 3 of those, the 2 different torus antennae and the vortex antennae, these generate scalar waves. So these are waves that can travel faster than light, and they're very, very powerful for neutralizing EMFs. These will also send these waves out into the universe, as I say, greater than light speed. So particularly the vortex antennae is very good for manifestation work. If you want to send intentions out to the universe, then buying something with a vortex antenna is a good way to do that. And then the other 2 Radionics discs I use, we've got the 24 karat gold tesseract energy pump, which is the one in that pyramid I just showed you. So when we arrange stones on each of these points, again, they each will amplify each other. The gold actually enhances the energetic flow between each of the points. So each point is connected to each other point, and they're all constantly radiating their energy towards each other and amplifying their energy. This, rather than dynamic vortex of energy creates a static energy field, which is incredibly powerful for manifestation. So I do have some customers that when they come to me saying, I want something for manifestation, I will suggest using the 24 karat gold tesseract pump. And then lastly, we've got the Lachowski MWO, stands for multi-wave oscillator. So this is a disc made with 24 karat gold again. And we've got these concentric circles which have an opening at either end, and it alternates whether the opening is top or bottom. And these again will accumulate and harmonize a range of different frequencies. So you've got broad spectrum frequency healing that can occur for the body. And again, there are various different sizes of these that I use in different devices. So once you've chosen which orgonite is most appropriate for you, and I can always consult with people to help them gather the information they need to get the right orgonite for them, or to even custom build the right orgonite for them, then the question is, how do you use it? And you can very simply grid your home. A pyramid just needs to sit there and it will be constantly doing its thing. If you sit and meditate with it and charge it with your intention, the same way you could charge crystals, then it can have a very specific intentional purpose that you program it with. Charging plates like this one are ideal for charging food and water. As we know, we're more than 80% water, and the food and water that we consume is also water, drinks that we consume. Much of the water, especially going through our water cycle, is what we would term as yang water. So this again is water that has lost its harmonic frequency, full of all sorts of pollution, chemicals. So I do recommend either filtering or distilling water, which I guess a lot of your followers will be aware of and do anyway. But what an orgone plate will do is this will actually restructure the water, bring it back to its harmonic frequency. So water, when it crystallizes, when it's frozen, is actually a hexagonal crystal. So there are lots of different crystalline structures. As we know, when we see snowflakes, they're always this hexagonal pattern. So this is also another reason why I will always use the hexagonal pattern when I'm making an orgone plate, because I know that this hexagonal geometry is the best geometry to use for restructuring water. And I always use neodymium magnets as well. And what I will do, I always put it in my description, I create what we call a Star of David pattern. So if I show the bottom of the plate as well, we've got SBB coils, sacred qubit at the bottom. So this is vertical energy field to project energy up. Then we've got empowerment qubit triskelion on top. We've got a lapis lazuli piece in there, and then underneath that, there's a neodymium magnet. And then there's also another neodymium magnet nearer the surface beneath this top coil. So we've got two magnets in here, in between the two coils. So we're getting a magnetic field being amplified in there as well. And so when I refer to the Star of David, you've got this six-pointed star that is essentially made up of two intersecting equilateral triangles. You've got a downward pointing triangle and an upward pointing triangle. So the downward pointing triangle represents the feminine, the upward pointing triangle represents the masculine, and then when they intersect and form the six-pointed star, this is the divine union of masculine and feminine that leads to creation. So the feminine is yin, the masculine is yang. And so you would consider the 3 points of each triangle to be either masculine or feminine. Also, as we know with magnets, you have a north pole and a south pole. So if you try and put the magnets together, either south to south or north to north, they repel. But if you put north to south, they attract. So when I say a Star of David, and the north pole of a magnet is considered the yin pole, the feminine pole, and the south pole of a magnet is considered the yang pole, the masculine pole. So what I will do is I will alternate the magnets. So when they're put in these 6 positions in this hexagonal layout, 3 here will be south pole up. The other 3 here will be north pole up. So you've got your yin triangle and you've got your yang triangle. You've then got a south pole up magnet, sorry, a north pole up magnet in the middle that's drawing the energy from all and creating this powerful magnetic vortex field that's then adding to the energy of everything else within that geometric grid. So do believe I'm probably the only orgone maker in the world doing that. I mean, there are some other good orgone makers that I respect. Haven't heard of anybody doing that yet. We'll see if people start doing it now that this video goes out. But I do feel that's one of the things that makes my orgones unique compared to others that are available. And you've certainly got that layout in your plate that you've got there, Steve.
Yeah, they are unique, totally unique. I recommend them. I've had them for a few weeks now, and we really love them. My partner's commandeered one. I've got 2 here. But we got a few more minutes, Tim, just to say, what else are you up? What events are you doing? I know you're selling crystals as well. Can you just let people know about that?
Yeah, so I do sell crystals as well. I try not to talk about them for too long, but I do try to focus on crystals that aren't normally available in most UK metaphysical crystal shops. So I have things like this. This is orange calcite. Now, when you see orange calcite in most metaphysical crystal shops, it will just be the rough or tumbled polished stones. But calcite is actually an incredible crystal that can form a whole range of geometric patterns. So this is one where it's forming triangular geometry, again, going back to sacred geometry. These geometric formations are incredibly powerful. We've also got other forms of calcite that can form. This is a red calcite, and hopefully you can see here it's forming almost perfect dodecahedrons. So this all goes back to the Platonic solids, which are the fundamental building blocks of the universe. They each relate to a different element. So air, water, fire, earth, and ether. And when you can buy a crystal that actually has these kinds of geometric patterns, here we've got some cubic pyrite, for example. So the cubis at Earth, octahedron is, let's just slow down a bit. The cubis at Earth, which resonates with the root chakra. We've got the icosahedron, which is the element of water, resonates with the sacral chakra. You've got the octahedron, so something like this, octahedral fluorite, is the element of air, resonates with the heart chakra and the throat chakra. And then you've got the dodecahedron, which I just showed, resonates with the element of ether, and also is the geometric foundation of the folding of our DNA. So dodecahedral crystals, ones that are naturally growing in a dodecahedral form, these are the best crystals, for DNA repair. So working with, if we want to really heal any conditions we've got, which come from essentially misalignments in our DNA. But also because of the way our DNA works, they're really good for ancestral work. So if you want to contact your ancestors, dodecahedral crystals are the way to go. So I've tried to specialize in, again, these sort of things you wouldn't normally find in a metaphysical crystal shop. In terms of events, since October last year, I met the most amazing sound healer, Muna Escoffery. She's got her own website, Angelicacenatio, where we are constantly posting on Instagram together. We do regular monthly healing workshops. She's an incredibly gifted sound healer, very, very powerful starseed, channels messages through. And we intuitively connected. She instantly recognized, you know, the power of what I do. I feel like I need to humble myself a bit there, and immediately started suggesting that we work together. And we've started gridding the space within which she does her sound healing with a range of orgone devices and a range of crystals in a very specific geometric grid. And the feedback so far from the regular people that have been going to her workshops is that it's amplified the power immensely. So that's another thing you can do with orgones and crystals, is use them to grid a healing space within which any healer is working, and it will amplify the healing modality that they're working with, whether it's, you know, herbalism, acupuncture, sound healing, whatever it may be. You can use orgonites to amplify healing in any way, shape or form. But those regular monthly workshops that we're doing, they're in Crystal Palace in London. We are looking to do some outside in the summer as well, out in nature. And if anyone's interested, then they can contact either myself or Muna through our websites or through Instagram. And yeah, and we can arrange for them to book a space.
Fabulous, Tim. Well, if anybody wants to know more about Tim and his work, quantumvortex.net, do check it out. You can hear the amount of kind of information and wisdom that goes into creating these things. So, Tim, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time as well, Steve. I really appreciate the opportunity for the interview. Thank you.